Today we're going to be talking about audio interfaces. What are they and do you need one? Hello everyone and welcome to Wav Spot. My name is Austin Knaus and I've spent the last 2 decades working with audio. My goal with this channel is to share all the fundamentals I've learned along the way in hopes to give you a fast track to understanding the world of sound. So, let's dive in. So, what is an audio interface? An audio interface is probably the second most important part of your studio. It allows us to connect instruments and microphones to our computer. Now, you're probably familiar with the aux cord or the RCA, but what about instruments? They use 1/4-inch cables, which are quite a bit bigger than an aux cord. What about microphones? They use XLR cables, which are these 3 pins in here. While in the consumer world, we're used to 3.5 millimeter or an aux cable. In the professional environment, we primarily use 1/4-inch cables. Instruments like guitars or synthesizers, keyboards would use a 1/4-inch cable. So what an audio interface allows us to do is connect this type of connector from the device that we're trying to record into the computer. Not only is it how we record microphones and instruments, but it's also how we control the volume of our headphones, as well as our speakers. Some audio interfaces connect to a computer via USB, some connect via FireWire, some are even Thunderbolt or USB-C. This is really important to consider when shopping for an audio interface, because if your computer doesn't have the right connector port, you might as well have just wasted your money, because if you can't connect the audio interface to your computer, it's not going to work. Not only does the audio interface allow us to record instruments and microphones, as well as playback through our speakers, it also takes a little bit of the workload off the processing of the computer. The sound card that comes built into your computer isn't going to give you studio-grade audio quality, but a decent audio interface will. So now that you know that the audio interface is the means of getting the microphone into the computer, how do you know which one's right for you? There's a couple different variables here. First, we have to think about the connections on our computer. Like we discussed, we have USB, Thunderbolt, FireWire, USB-C. Does your computer have those ports? Second, we have to think about the inputs and outputs, or the I/O. An input is where the instrument or the microphone goes into the audio interface. An output is where the audio comes out of, or an output is where you would connect your speakers to. If I want to record one microphone, all I need is one microphone input. If I want to listen back on my speakers, I need 2 outputs, one for my left speaker and one for my right speaker. If I want to record a microphone and a guitar at the same exact time, I'm going to need 2 inputs. If you want to record a whole band, you're probably going to need 8, 16, 24 inputs. The base recommendation is at least getting 2 inputs and 2 outputs. So at bare minimum, you can record one microphone and an instrument at any given time. This is considered a 2 in, 2 out. When working with audio interfaces, we're going to consider the inputs and the outputs, and this is abbreviated by I/O, or I/O. If you see an audio interface that's titled 2I, 2O, you know that it's going to be 2 in and 2 out. If you see an audio interface labeled as 16I, 8O, then you know that there's going to be 16 inputs and then 8 outputs. They come in all sorts of different configurations. Long story short, your I/O is dictated by you, the artist, and how many things that you want to simultaneously record at any given time. If you're planning on making electronic music and you're not planning on recording any vocals or instruments and you're strictly working in samples, a 2i2 is going to last you years. And more often than not, you outgrow your computer's processing power before you outgrow your audio interface. So the audio interface allows us to connect the microphones and instruments to our computer. Most importantly, it allows us to get the audio into our DAW. It also supplies 48-volt phantom power to microphones that require it in order to operate. We'll get into that later. The audio interface is essentially an external sound card for your computer. Once you connect it to your computer, it will become an option for you to select as a recording or a playback device. This allows your computer to listen to the audio interface as well as play music out of the audio interface. Whether you're working with Windows, Mac, or Linux, this can be configured in your audio settings. If you've ever connected headphones or a Bluetooth speaker to your computer, then you've already messed with these settings. After you've selected the audio interface to be your primary sound card for your computer, you'll want to select it as the primary sound card for your DAW as well. Regardless of what DAW you chose, the option to select an audio interface will be in your preferences or audio settings or audio devices. You want the DAW to listen to the audio interface to hear the microphones and instruments, and you'll want the DAW to use the audio interface to play back through your speakers. I'm hoping you're starting to pick up as to why the audio interface is important when it comes to a studio. Without it, we really can't record any instruments or microphones. If you want more information on where at in your DAW's settings can you select an audio interface, head over to wavespot.com. I have more documentation there. Not all, but most audio interfaces come with their own softwares in order to configure the audio interface. Some are plug and play, which means that you just plug it in and it just works. Some audio interfaces need drivers installed before it will communicate with your computer. Some audio interfaces, like the Universal Apollo, come with full-on mixing console softwares to pair with your DAW for more control. A lot of music hardware comes with free software, free instruments, and even some free DAWs. So before you toss that box, make sure you read the instructions that come with the audio interface that you buy. In the intermediate courses, we'll get into why some audio interfaces are $200 and some audio interfaces are $1,500, but they're both 2 ins and 2 outs. For now, there's no reason to go buy the most expensive gear. If you're blessed with deep pockets, by all means go buy the best. But if you're just getting started and you're determined to work with audio, getting a simple Scarlett 2i2 for $200 is going to last you years. So what is an audio interface? The audio interface is our main input and output device, allowing us to record instruments and microphones into our DAW, as well as play back our audio to the speakers. Without an audio interface, we wouldn't be able to record instruments or power microphones that require 48-volt phantom power. The audio interface also allows us to control the volume of our headphones as well as our speakers. Audio interfaces come in multiple input and output configurations, with the amount of inputs being dependent on how many microphones or instruments you, the artist, want to record simultaneously. The amount of outputs is dependent on how many speakers or playback devices you're trying to connect in your system, remembering that each speaker requires its own output, one for left, one for right. If you want to connect 2 sets of speakers, you'll need 4 outputs, 2 for each left and 2 for each right. Side note, if you want to get into recording but you can't afford an audio interface and a microphone at the same time, finding a decent USB microphone will work as well. Though I highly recommend settling on just getting an interface and later down the line getting a microphone, because eventually, after you outgrow your USB microphone, you'll still need an audio interface in order to integrate a higher quality microphone. There's no wrong way to start, and there's no wrong way to learn. As long as you start and as long as you're learning, you're on the right track. If you found any of this information valuable, make sure to hit that subscribe button. I release a new video every Monday. If you want to read more on the topic, feel free to head over to wavespot.com. I have all of today's illustrations and more details written in a blog post. If you learned something new or you still have some questions, feel free to leave a comment below. And until next episode, thanks for watching.